Imagine the sweetness in the morning. You riding the breeze in the sky, you're floating. I'm riding my soul, and I'm so free. I'm not letting go, forever holding. I'm riding my soul. I'm riding my soul. I'm free. I'm riding my soul. I'm riding my soul. I'm free. Riding my soul. My soul. Yes, baby. Come running on the floor, forever holding. I am Imagine the sweetness morning. You riding the breeze in the sky, floating. I'm riding my soul, and I'm so free. I'm not letting go.
Guys, none of these are going to work. If this is going to be a hit, we need the right lead. It's so demeaning to pick a female lead this way. But people pay to see pretty people on screen. We need someone who's blatantly attractive. Ne? Someone like Drew Barrymore, but local and much, much younger.
Okay.
Someone like Lebu.
Lebu?
Yep. What? She's pretty but ordinary looking.
No, boss, I don't think I'd be the right
Work
one
with
for
me
that.
here, work with me. We need someone with Lebu's eyes. The secret is in the eyes. Everything is plain, but the eyes say, come hither. If we can find a girl with Lebu's boobs, that will be fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I want. Minus the pregnant belly, of course.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And thank you so much for tuning in. We're very excited about this opportunity to partner with Gauteng Film Commission. We are from Swift, and the video you've just seen was one of our public service announcements that basically sums up what we do in terms of trying to advocate for job security, safer working environments, and of course, equal pay for women on film and television sets. We're from Swift, sisters working in film and television. And for today, we are going to be talking about script writing. How do we write relatable characters who have rich and textured imagined lives? How do we make people come to screen on television who you can actually see yourself in? I'm not by myself. I'm with some very distinguished and qualified women who work in the industry, starting off with Carol Khanyago Ralefeta. Please introduce yourself, sis. Welcome. Thanks for being here with us.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor. And yes, as you've said, I'm Caroline Khanyago-Ralefeta, and I am a screenwriter, I'm a filmmaker, and a storyliner, as well as creative producer. And that's what I love. So being here and talking about screenwriting is definitely something that I'm quite passionate about. Yeah, and I work with Chats of Pictures and several telenovelas in the country that we will talk more about.
Fantastic. And of course, we know Chats of Pictures makes The River, amongst other beautiful productions. Also with us today is Robin Fayoun, who works as a scriptwriter, amongst other things within the production realm. Robin, good afternoon. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be part of such an awesome initiative and among such brilliant company. I'm a screenwriter, I'm a videographer and a video editor, so I sort of do the whole thing. I'm busy in a screenwriting project at the moment, in a very exciting project, which is a procedural drama done by Female Media about a special unit that's been developed to combat gender-based violence. So that's really exciting, and yeah, I'm glad to be here.
That sounds exciting and like something that's needed in our day and time, considering everything that's happening in our country and of course around the world. So thanks for being with us, Robin. And of course, we have also Flavia Mutsisi. Thank you so much for being with us, Flavia. Good afternoon to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that you are a commissioning editor based here in Johannesburg. Give us a little bit more about your background and the work you do.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me. I am super excited to be engaging with these amazing women today. I am Flavia Mutsisi. I'm a commissioning editor. I work in the broadcasting space. I commission for Mnet's local entertainment channels, and I focus purely on scripted content. And the current shows that probably are on air that I'm working on would be Gomorrah, the telenovela, as well as Housekeepers, the series. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And we'll unpack more stuff that I've worked on and what commissioning entails as we continue the conversation.
Looking forward to it. And I know that Gomorrah was trending yesterday on Twitter, so it seems to be doing really well. So congratulations on that. And just to start off our conversation, we're going to watch a bit of a video that's going to unpack what our session is about today, just in terms of what you've all talked about, scripting content, writing relatable characters, and really bringing to life characters that we see on television. So, Mr. Technical Director, if we can just have the video that shows us how to script for relatable and realistic dialogue. So let's get into that, and then we'll unpack a little bit more after the video.
Everything is ours now.
You're selling all of the art? Dad, why?
We don't have room for
Do
it.
you want to sell?
Oh, come on. Cabrera just grounded into a double play.
Matt set this up?
I told him it was a family discussion.
I think it is. I don't think you should sell it all. I'm telling you.
Didn't expect you to get so upset about it.
I am upset about it.
Why do you care?
I don't know.
One thing I think film can do really well, better than any other medium, is capture the reality of conversations. In a book, no matter how you lay it out, one piece of dialogue always has to follow another. You can't simulate people talking over each other, which is what we all do a lot of the time. And you can't really capture the rhythm, speed, and tone that a conversation has. Even radio and theater miss some of the nuances that film is perfectly suited to reproduce.
Maureen only told us he was in the hospital this morning.
Via text.
They were staying up
We
here
drove
at
from
Maureen's
Rochester
country
to
house.
Pittsfield.
We wanted to talk to a
We haven't been able to get any
doctor.
information.
Of all the filmmakers working right now, I think Noah Baumbach maybe has the best ear for dialogue as it really is. And an ear is what it takes, because there's a general disconnect between what we all sound like and what movie and TV characters sound like, especially the most articulate ones.
You asked me that moronic question, and then my world came apart, and she came here, and I landed in the tabloids, and I got death threats, and my job is constantly in jeopardy, and you ruined my life?
Again, just stay. Yes, that was me.
Of course, you don't have to aim at realistic speech. Screenwriters like Aaron Sorkin and Quentin Tarantino have done really great work by writing human dialogue as it could be, finding music and language the same way that Shakespeare did centuries ago. But Baumbach, on the other hand, seems to be committed to a different principle.
You know, I think I mentioned to you I left the company I was with, and me and a couple other people started our own firm. It was scary and a big change, but things have settled and we're doing really well.
Maureen is talking to a friend
A lot of our
who
old
works at the
clients came
Times
with
about
us.
getting someone to come up and review the show.
I think we're
In recent years, I've essentially been ignored by
we're
the
a great
Times.
alternative to some of the
And I
bigger
think this
firms.
might put me back on the map.
This is our logo.
$55 for a steak.
I think a conversation like this speaks volumes. In one sense, just by looking at it, you can see that this is a total failure of communication between father and son. The two men are on parallel tracks. Matt is talking about his new business, and Harold is talking about his forthcoming art retrospective. But in another sense, what makes this exchange so heartbreaking and true to life, at least for me, is that they really are communicating with each other, just not explicitly. Matt brings up a major life change and expresses some of the hopes and fears he has about it, and his father immediately brings up his own major life event and some of the hopes and fears he has about that. Implicitly, Matt is asking for approval, he's asking for reassurance, and he's asking for consolation. Harold, on the other hand, is denying approval because he can't bear his son being more successful than he is, while asking for reassurance of his own hopes and consolation for his own fears. It's like the two men are firing a volley of missiles at each other. Some are hitting, some are missing, and some are crashing into each other in midair. I think Baumbach understands a key dynamic in conversations, especially conversations with family. When we speak to others, we're often speaking to ourselves, attempting to frame dialogue so that the person we're talking to will reflect back the things that we want to believe about us.
Okay, so we've just seen that clip that breaks down how naturally and organically conversation happens when we're speaking in real person face to face. And sometimes what we find when we're watching films or television is one character will speak and then the other character will speak. And sometimes there's even a little bit of that awkward moment where you know the other character is waiting for the other one to speak before they'll speak. So I like the way that this video sort of breaks down how organically we do speak on top of each other and actually overlap in real life, and how to make that come to life. What are some of your reflections just in terms of this video we've seen? Let's start with you, Carol.
Sure. I love that video very much because I enjoy dialogue. It's one of the things that I pay most attention to when I'm watching content. I mean, acting obviously is a big one. It's about how the actors bring the performance to life. But I feel that the dialogue is what carries the emotion, and that's what captivates me as an audience or a viewer watching something. So, I mean, often I'll forget the title of the movie, but I'll remember what was said, and I'll remember why that stayed with me. It's that it just carried emotion. So it is for me, very important. And I think what novel script writers tend to do is we kind of regurgitate what we've heard before. And so there's a bit of that, missing originality. And so it's always about finding new ways of telling the story through dialogue and giving actors something that will also shock them, And so I think that what we did do before in the past is we often just wrote it, as you said, where we'll give each other chances, we'll finish our sentences. People speak in full sentences, whereas that's not how we speak in real life. So there's always how people speak in TV and how people speak in real life. And now we're trying to mesh the two and make it as realistic as possible, throwing ad-libs in there. And so, yeah, I think that that's how we get better in how we can write dialogue. It's creative ways of doing it. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Flavia, what parts of that video for you stand out just in terms of the kind of content you also make?
I mean, it really resonates with me, and I absolutely love that video. And I just want to echo Caroline's sentiments in the sense that, you know, as people, we don't finish our words when we talk. Our sentence construction doesn't make sense, and in an end. However, when you watch something on screen, everything is so polished and it's so, sort of like according to the book. So I absolutely agree with Caroline in a sense that, we come into a space whereby the narrative and the way we see the narrative in our screens is reflecting what's happening in reality. But also what's also really fun and engaging in that sense, I just lost my train of thought. But what's also really fun and engaging in that sense is to look at the nuance, to look at the nuancing and the texture in which character or a specific character would speak. And what I find a lot in scripts is sometimes, writers will write with the same voice for all the characters, and they end up using the same words and sort of articulate their expressions in the same way. And I think when you have a colorful script or you have a colorful series or a movie is when a writer and an actor can come together and they collaborate and they can define that character, and you know that Flavia will sound like this when she talks, and Sarah will sound like this when she talks. And there's no way Caroline would say or use the same word that Robin would use per se. I think when you find yourself having a screenplay that is well-rounded in that sense, where a character stands out and there's no echoing, that's where the beauty begins, right? And that's where an actor can also, own their character for themselves. The problem that we find a lot is that, sometimes you do find writers repeating the same sort of like textures and nuances, and it takes away from the colorfulness that the story can be,
Exactly. So the individualistic characteristics of one character should not be sounding like another, because their experiences, their life story, etc., is so different. So it should come out in the dialogue and the way that they're portrayed on screen. Robin, any thoughts on this before we get into the workshop?
Yeah, I just love what Flavia said about different textures of voices. I think that a great quality of a good screenwriter is being observant and being able to be quiet and watch and observe how people interact and true human behavior and all of those different flavors that people bring in, and then being able to take that observation and interpret it and put it on the page. And I think something else that just the general viewer tends to do when we're watching films and television is it's so easy to blame the acting. It's so easy to say, oh, this actor's bad, or oh, the acting's bad. But an actor can only really do so much with a script and how the director interprets that script for them. So, I mean, really it does all start with the script. And really, putting in the time and the effort to develop those unique voices and to consider, I mean, something that the video also brought up is that conversation doesn't necessarily have to be natural in that sense. Like, I consider Quentin Tarantino to be one of the most excellent at dialogue. And yet he does it in almost like a fantastical way, but he's also very good at observing people and pulling out those mannerisms and the lingo and those nuances that just really make it very interesting and entertaining to watch.
Great. So obviously the starting point is the page. The starting point are the words that are on the paper in front of you. And you have different setups and different television production companies and different studios, etc. So I just want to start with you, Caroline, in terms of unpacking. How do we make scripting compelling? And also just take us through what is the business side of scripting? So just walk us through your experience in terms of how this journey has been and how you go about making your stories come to life from page to screen.
Sure. I mean, I'll definitely take you through my personal journey where I did start in broadcasting. So I kind of had that advantage in that I know I have the business necessary know-how in terms of what is in demand, what do audiences want to see, what works for the company, for the business as a broadcaster. I can't speak for others, but I know that I did work at Mnet and MultiChoice. And so that gave me an insight, I would say. And so it helped me to kind of know how to write proposals that would get the attention of the commissioning editors like the likes of Flavia. And so that is the first step. Writing is that you have to know what is in demand. You have to know, what is the trend, what is currently missing in our screens, and write for that. It is easy to say my passion is writing science fiction. But if that's not what the audience wants to see and that's not what the broadcaster wants, it's going to be very hard to get your proposal across, right? So I write a lot of realism and drama, and that is what I've seen has worked, for me in my line of work. And that is, I write for telenovelas. So I write for The River and Gomorrah, and an upcoming series called telenovela called Legacy that's going to be on Mnet. And so in all of that, it's about neorealism. It's about understanding what South African audiences are looking to explore and experience and what they relate to. So that's one. And then two is you have to be very informed. You have to know what works. And that is research as well. We often take it for granted because you write from what you know, but you also have to be informed about current affairs. What is happening in the world and around us? And will this story be sensitive to that, or will it be, kind of going against the grain of what the zeitgeist is, where we are in South Africa? We're very cognizant of, be it racial issues, be gender-based violence, gender-based violence. And so when we write those stories, we have to write with that in mind. So keep abreast, watch content. That's definitely something that I can't emphasize enough, because you will know what's being done right, what works and what doesn't. Watch local content, because it is different. We're all very influenced by American content, but there's so much more variety that you get from watching local content and watching even other foreign content. So that brings you a more well-rounded approach when you write for local content. And so reading a lot of books helps. We might take it for granted, but it definitely improves just how you write your descriptions and how you write your scripts. It can get quite repetitive when you write, for especially something long running such as a telenovela. So you've always got to come up with creative ways of making your script stand out, of giving them actions in scenes just such as a breakfast scene. How do you write that differently? We've seen it so many times. It gets boring, it gets repetitive. So thinking of creative ways to stage that. As a writer, you really have to also understand that you have to think like a director in a way, because you are guiding what is going to eventually go onto screen. So you can't just take it loosely, such as, writing an action description as people are always just drinking coffee every time, because that's what the director then can only do when they are in production. So you really have to think like that. You are the blueprint, you are at the conceptual phase. So you also have a big influence in how the finished product is going to look. Yes, there will be, a production meeting, and the actor will also make it their own. But as Robin mentioned, rightfully so, there's only so much they can do. You have to have invested yourself in how you've written that. And so for me, it was about starting from the basics, being in that writing room and learning, hearing why and how and what has worked and why this hasn't worked. And so I think even just writing scene descriptions is so pivotal in that we often focus on the climax, but every scene is an episode in itself. I think you have to find the beginning, the middle, and the end, and make that as compelling as you can. And then that feeds into the next, And so it really is about paying attention and not trying to find shortcuts, because it is going to come across. And viewers often are forgiving, but there are moments where they will call you out on those shortcuts that you've taken. And granted, there are many influences on why, certain things play out the way it is. Budget, all of that. COVID has definitely interrupted a lot of our productions, but you have to be intentional in that. And another thing that I found, as a writer coming when I was starting out, is I did often lean on what I've seen and kind of let that guide me and say, okay, I want to write like this person. But you have to write from your own perspective. You have to let Caroline be that. I can't be Sarah. I can only write from my perspective. And that's what will make it unique, because nothing's unprecedented. Everything's been done, some way, somehow, in Italy or in France, it's been written. You have to write it from your own unique perspective. And that's what will stand out. And I think once I grasped that, I started to understand that, okay, maybe I don't write. What doesn't work for me is a lot of event kind of action. So I want to write something that's more character driven and more, emotion driven. And so that's what I would then go with. And it's about finding your own voice in what you write and let that, stand out. And if it works, it will work. So yeah, I write for productions that are written in English, but then they have to be translated. And so 2 of them anyway, that is, The River and Gomorrah are written in English, but they are translated to Vernac. And that can also pose a challenge because things get lost in translation. So you have to be specific in how you write it so that messaging is not going to get lost to the actor that's reading it. So those kind of things are and naturally you can get away with reading your own work, but I prefer one to immerse themselves in reading other work, and not even just the ones you work on. If you're fortunate or able to read other scripts, other productions, and learn from how they write. That's one thing that has helped me, because I could see that, oh wait, this I'm doing it like this. And something that Flavia mentioned as well, which is seeing the tone of how this person being a different character, either they're old, sounds like somebody who's young and a millennial, and it's not working. So you pick up those things when you start reading scripts. And one thing I'll say, and I'll really bring it close to home, as writing for a show that is based in a specific place, specifically Gomorrah, you have to think of the nuance, the language. They're not going to speak like Caroline, not all of them anyway. So you have to think, how do I make it local? How do I bring that flavor? And one of the ways to do that is to observe. So you have to, if you can, go there, go on set, spend time, go, even if it's not on production, go be in those spaces and among those people and observe. And that definitely has helped me in a lot. Yeah, so I think there's so many more that I will answer to when questions are posed, but certainly a writer cannot be somebody that's just cooped up behind the screen, because you will miss a lot of the life events that influence your writing.
Fantastic, Caroline. And just in terms of what you're saying about observation and being immersed in what's happening around you, just in terms of current affairs, in terms of what's happening on the street in Gomorrah. I think Gomorrah is touching a nerve, because I saw a scene from Gomorrah the other day where the young man is basically talking about this speech about how we've lost ourselves in terms of not seeing the world around us. You know, he's standing in this hall talking to all his friends, and it's almost quite EFF / political / you know, all the things that are happening in terms of inequalities, corruption, and things that are coming out around us are reflected back to us on screen. So I think that's really powerful what you're saying about really being in touch with what's happening on the ground and what matters to people, you know. So that's really, really important. Anything to say to Caroline from what we've heard from Caroline?
I really agree with Caroline's advice to read scripts. Definitely, if you want to be a scriptwriter, or if you are a scriptwriter, you can basically Google any script from any movie that you love, and you can find that script. In almost all cases, read scripts, read them, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess for me to add on would just be that the psychology of a writer is, I mean, as someone who also studied writing, and I'm a writer myself, you know, the thing is, as you know, engross yourself into the art of writing, and, you know, working on your craft and going on and on and on, ideally, you know, you paint this whole picture of one day when I write, I'm going to tell stories that I want to tell. But I guess what I'd like to perhaps also pose and just have a conversation around to Caroline is, what then happens when you know, you've built this sort of like ideal in your head that you're going to write what you want to write, and then you know, get into the industry and you have to work for a Ted's Pictures per se and write a Legacy or Gomorrah or The River, and it's totally different from the type of stories you want to tell, and it's totally different from, you know, what it is that excites you. How do you still pull from yourself, as you said? Because I mean, that really resonated for me when you said you need to write what you know. But how do you write what you know and apply it in something that maybe you might not necessarily have conceptualized, and something that you might not necessarily be passionate about? You know, what would you say to writers regarding that? Because I've always found that to be quite interesting and fascinating.
Sure. I mean, a very important question. And I've found that it may come from perhaps a place of privilege, in that you work on what you love, and great for you if you can. But it is tough, and it is about business as well. You know, Sarah, to your question about making a career out of it. It's tough because there's bills to pay. And so sometimes I would say work with what you love. But if not, it's also about finding that influence. And for script writers, it is harder, I will admit. In the position of being a storyliner or a head writer, you have more influence. And those are some of the other roles that I think we may not know in terms of what they do, but once you get in, you start to understand there's more to this than just script writing. There's story editing, there's storylining, and there's head writing. And all of those are roles that have more influence, if I can just, you know, be quite honest, than script writing. And that's where I think you can sit with the executive producers and head writers and say, this is what I think, you know, should be on screen. And this is what I think we ought to do to change certain things, such as stereotyping. It's a lot. We see that a lot, and we play to it because it's easy. But, you know, if you're going to be that person that is passionate, that speaks to their, you know, to their passions and their desires, what they want to see, as you've said, it does require that you have the ability, in that you are given the access, you're given the roles that have the influence, honestly. And it's not easy. You know, there are people who, I mean, I can say that I've also had to be quite strict in disciplining myself to say, is this something I'm going to be passionate about? Is this something that speaks true to who I am? And if I can't do it, I would have to walk away, because this job, writing or creative work, requires your heart and soul in it. And when it's not there, it also shows, because, you know, you are in conflict with your own beliefs and your own kind of principles. So where do you draw from when you write that story that is so conflicting to what you think should be on our screens and should be given out for people to see and put your name on it. So I think that you have to get to a place where you are able to have that influence, and then you can make the decisions around, I'm not going to associate myself with this, or I am, and be honest with yourself.
Yeah. And you know, Robin mentioned earlier about being fortunate enough to be in a writing room for female media for a project about GBV, which is primarily women. But in your experience, what do writing rooms look like? Who are they constituted of? And what sway does one realistically have?
I've been really fortunate in that when I got into the freelancing world and started as a writer, the rooms that I worked into had a lot of women of color as well. So I didn't go in and feel very, out of place. So I've been fortunate in that instance that I could find my voice and be comfortable and not feel intimidated that I am the only person that looks like me that will relate to my life and lived experience. So and that's not just at Chesa Pictures, although they have quite a lot of female writers. It's also just with Siriti Films as well, and a few others that one can really just think of from the top of their minds, where there are women in those writing rooms, and they are comfortable enough to speak out and say, I think that we're rushing this. I think we're not really finding the heart of the story for representation. And a story can be good, but how do we make it great? And what is it that we aren't doing? How are we going to make this better? And sometimes it requires you to have to really tell the hard truths and reshoot if it needs to be reshot. But you really cannot sit there. And sometimes it is just unwitting. You cannot sit there and expect that the men will speak for you. You have to be open enough to stand up and say, I don't think this representation of this female character is the best we can give it. Let's do it this way, because they are always open to hearing your viewpoints. They cannot speak for you. And I think sometimes, not always, we do put that expectation on the male EP or the male director to have that voice for us when we haven't spoken out. And maybe we sit in a kind of victim mentality around, well, I don't think that they're going to do it. I think that the male gaze is always going to win. And this is what sells. But you haven't given it a chance. You haven't spoken out and said, I strongly believe that this character shouldn't do this, because this is the messaging that we are giving when we say it like that. And I for one, have felt that we need to have that voice and that agency.
That's fantastic to hear. And that can only mean that when that translates to the screen, we're getting better productions that we're all able to enjoy and that can propel us forward in terms of storytelling. So that's good to hear. And just speaking about characters and representation and growing characters, Robin, please let us know about character introductions and building a character and really bringing that, the fullness and the holistic picture of a human being to screen.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, it actually ties in so nicely with what Carol was just saying about the representation of women on screen. And I actually, I came across this Twitter feed the other day that I just want to share with you guys in terms of character introductions. So it's a producer called Ross Putman, and he reads so many scripts, and even from his male perspective, he realized that the way that women were introduced in the scripts was so incredibly different and so minimized to the way that men were introduced in scripts. So if you don't mind, I just want to read a couple, because really placed like next to each other, you can see the profound regularity of how women are presented in films. And it starts with how they're represented on that paper, on that script, because then it's taken and it's never developed and often just ends up on screen. And a woman is always just, or regularly just, reduced to her looks, right? So here's some examples of things that he's shared from the scripts that he's posted. So he's changed all the names to Jane. So here's some character introductions, examples of bad character introductions. Says, Jane looks sexy in her gym gear as she works up a sweat. Jane's the Harvard type, smart as shit and beautiful. Jane, mid-20s, returns with plates for everyone. She's pretty, Hispanic. Jane, 40s, good-looking for her age. Jane, 40, gorgeous blonde, big-breasted, great body, beautiful smile. Jane, 50s, still very attractive. You can see just this running theme of the number one priority in explaining the female characters is exactly how beautiful are they? Where on this line of beautifulness do they fit? Oh, yeah, there's one more great one. Jane, 30s, is cute, but could be hot if she made an effort. And this is just the reality of it. I think on screen, just so many of the the movies that I watch really just objectify women. I think the general theme is that the male characters are developed to be the person that the audience is meant to want to be. They want to be this character. He's brave, he's adventurous, he's all these successful, all these things. And the woman is the character that the audience is supposed to desire. And I think that we have started changing that. And I think it's really important, not only for female scriptwriters, but I'd really like to call on male scriptwriters to invest in your female characters, to really give them character and to make them more than just their looks, to give them desires that are above and beyond wanting to find Prince Charming, you know? Yeah, do you guys have anything to add to that before I go into some tips?
Yeah, I mean, you can go. Who's going?
Go ahead, Flavia.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's really shocking to see and to hear, you know. And I appreciate the fact that you do acknowledge that we are starting to change it. Well, at least locally, we do see that there's a change in it. Whether it's enough, I'm not sure. Whether the portrayal and representation of the women that we see on screen is good, I'm not sure. I mean, that's a conversation we can have now. But what I will definitely also attribute to the industry and writers is that, you know, the type of female characters you would see on screen 5 years ago, not even that long ago, 5 years ago, to the type of female characters you see on screen now is very different. So the landscape has started changing, right? However, there are some systematic sort of like deep nuances and sort of like representations and archetypes that we still do see, right? That are quite problematic. And so the question then is, whose responsibility is it? Is what we need to, is the conversation, the fact that we need more female writers in spaces such as head writers and storyliners, as Caroline has said, because they're the ones that have more influence? Or is it a thing of now we have to, as you say, you know, gather men around and the male writers and tell them to write stronger, well-rounded, and more authentic females? And again, the question then is, where are they going to take from? As Caroline had said, you know, how do they write something that does not necessarily relate to them? So I think we also need to, as much as we talk about representation and how women are being portrayed and how women are being written, we need to look at the issue at the root cause and see what's the best way to you know, to convey and to work towards receiving the type of representation and character design we want for female characters, and see what's practical regarding that.
I couldn't agree more with what you've both said. And I mean, I think we have to also give ourselves some credit that our television industry is still young. Yes, we're getting impatient because we're trying to compare ourselves to, you know, the likes of Hollywood, but we have made strides. I can absolutely say that just looking at the telenovelas that have come on from Zandi alone, female-led, so many female leads, and that in itself I think is really an accomplishment, and we just want more of it. We want more of that, and we want to see that dynamic coming across where it's not just one kind of female character leads that look a certain way or feel a certain way. So I'm in agreement, and I think something that I remember from Shonda Rhimes saying is, she's always been asked, how do you write strong female leads? And she said, I don't know how not to write strong female leads. That's the company I keep. Those are my friends, my sisters. They're all strong female leads. So how do I not write them? That's the only way. So it really would be advantageous to have women in those influential roles, as we've just discussed, because that's what we know. I'm sitting now on this roundtable, virtual roundtable, with 3 strong women characters. It's easy to draw from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Sorry,
another
Robin,
thing too.
Just to perhaps just add on, sorry, to what Caroline is saying, is I think another important thing that we need to just keep in mind, coming from a broadcasting space, is the audience as well. As much as, we want to see strong female leads, are they well received? If a woman is archetypically assuming a role that you would necessarily contribute to a male character, and they are now, having to act in that role, is this something the audience is willing to receive? Is this something the audiences recognize? I'm not saying it's not, but I'm just saying that also, our audiences have traditionally been so used to this one-dimensional type of representation that they just so comfortable in the comfort zone. And as soon as you have a female lead who owns a drug house, right, and she's this mafia, it sort of becomes this big taboo thing, and audiences don't want to see it, or you're constantly getting complaints as a broadcaster, or you know what I mean? So I think those are also the dynamics to talk about, and to see how do we ease our viewers in to unlearn certain sort of like viewing patterns and learn new viewing patterns, and to see a different type of reflection of a woman on the screen. Sorry, Robin, I just wanted to add that as well.
Sorry, just to chime in there with what Flavia said, I think it's also obviously a part of the reason we make content to try to model the world that we aspire towards, to try to model a world that is more equal, a world that is not so one-dimensional, like you say. So I think sometimes there is a bit of a pushback and a challenge to bring audiences along to evolve in terms of their viewing habits as well. So I think it is definitely part of our responsibility as content makers to be able to push back sometimes as well. Robin, we're hijacking your presentation.
No stress. I'm making notes because I have so much to say. You all made really, really good points. And yeah, I agree, Sarah. I'm sort of on the side where I feel like we do need to challenge, like all the way. No, like spoon feeding and easing in, like go all the way and challenge audiences, because as much as we think, oh, it's what the audience wants, it's what the audience wants, the fact is that in representation, both behind the screen and on screen, it's male dominated. Most of the heroes are male. Most of the filmmakers, the DOPs, the directors are men. But not most of the audience is men. It's about 50-50, right? And we have to really take responsibility for it, because it's this feedback loop, We think, oh, okay, we're making this content because it's what people want. But the media, and in particular fiction and film and television, plays such a huge role, and it really can change the world. That's what I believe. And it plays such a huge role. I mean, if you just think about it, right? If we have a little boy who's growing up in a home where he doesn't have strong female role models, or even a little girl, and the only way that he's seeing women is on screen, and they're consistently objectified and diminished down to the size of their breasts, he's going to grow up thinking that this is normal, and that's what women really are. So I'm all for challenges, 100% challenges. The next point that I wanted to talk about was just this very thing of strong female characters. And I think that this is misrepresented a lot in that, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I think a lot of people think, oh, they want strong female characters, so we need a female lead who is really literally strong. You know, she can kick ass, she's a kung fu fighter, she's a superhero. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, that's really inspiring and exhilarating and everything like that. But I think what we really want when we say we want strong female characters is we want them to be well-rounded. We want them to be real and relatable and reflect real human beings, you know? We want them to have strengths and flaws and goals and desires that, like I said, that transcend and is more than just, oh, I want to find Prince Charming. And that, I think, is really what we need to tackle. And Caroline, to go back to one of your earlier points about where do we make this change? Is it behind the scenes? And yes, I think really very much. But it's going to be a slow process in getting women into the industry, you know, in upskilling and allowing for this possibility. I don't know about you ladies, and I don't think it's specifically just as a woman, but in school, did you ever imagine that you were going to be in film and working in film and television? For me, it didn't even cross my mind because it just felt so remote and so impossible. And not only as a woman, but just as a person living in South Africa, you know. But I think that, yes, as writers, we do want to write someone who reflects us. You know, when I write, I almost always, if it's my choice, I make the lead character a woman, you know. But I think that we also need to give the men, the male writers, a bit of credit because they have mothers, they have sisters, they have best friends, they have lovers. They know women who are more than just their looks, who are more than just there to support the man. They have the capability, while we tackle the very long road in getting more women in as a representation behind the scenes as writers, as directors, that in the meantime, I'd really like to call on men to flesh out the female characters and think about how they're representing them. You know, when you're writing a draft, give it to your mom, give it to your sister, give it to your friend, give it to them to read and ask them, really, what do they think? How can I make this person more interesting, more complex, more dynamic? Yeah, that's my 2 cents for now.
Yeah, Robin, it's about authenticity at the end of the day, right? It's about being able to relate to the character that you've written based on all the other aspects of continuity that you've created and that the audience is able to see through the portrayal of their life story. So it's about the authenticity, and that authenticity can be about femininity. I'll never forget this. Flavia said this some time ago at a workshop, that when we see a woman portrayed as strong, she's wearing a power suit or has to have those masculine tendencies as you talked about, but there's also power in that femininity. There's also a lot of power in our feminine and maternal and other things that are more attributed to women. So we can write more about those based on real life women heroes that we see all the time, that we are with every day, that we, you know, women that make very little money last the whole month between 3 children in a single parent childhood. That is strength. That is admirable. That is like superhero stuff. It doesn't have to be holding a gun or learning karate and learning how to do a roundhouse kick for me to be seen as badass. So yeah, I think it's about
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just to reiterate, there's nothing wrong with a woman being sexy or beautiful or being a mother or a leading role, supporting role, or being a princess. There's nothing wrong with these stereotypes or these tropes. It's just how we go about it and just adding to that, you know? considering it and asking ourselves, does this really serve our story? What serves our story? How do we make this person more real, more authentic?
Mm, mm. And just one more thing about the women characters. There was a cartoonist in the late 80s. She was called Lisa Bechdel Wallace. And they do this test in Hollywood where they look at female characters in terms of, do we know their names? Do they speak to other female characters within the setting? And when they speak to other female characters, what do they talk about other than a man? You know what I mean? So there's many other things that women could be speaking about other than my boyfriend, babe. You know what I mean? So there's this test that they do to be able to determine what the screen time of a woman being on there, what she's taking it up doing, you know? So yes, she's there, but what is it about? You know? And someone sent us a comment on the feed, and they're saying that, I think this is from Uratile Mujoge. I think the challenge with reading international script is that you tend to Americanize South Africans. It would be cool if we had a website for local scripts as well. Yeah. So
I love that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I love that so much. I think that is just so brilliant. I think as South African creatives, be it writers or production, whatever the means may be in the film and television industry, we tend to always borrow and mirror Hollywood to us. You know, one, we're already setting ourselves up for failure because we don't have the money and the budget that they have. And two, it's also taking away from our essence. You know what I mean? Because, you know, South Africa is so rich in story. I think, you know, as much as Caroline had said that, you know, everything has been told before, I fully agree with that, you know, as someone who comes from a place where we're constantly accused of taking people's stories. But I think there's also just so much nuance that we haven't even scraped on the surface in terms of storytelling. And I think in the past 10 to 5 years, there's been really brilliant stuff coming out, be it on linear, be it on cinematic spaces, be it on OTT, doesn't matter. But South African filmmakers and television practitioners have really, really been putting amazing content out there and writing really compelling stuff that are authentic. And I love that idea. Why do we not have a bank? Why do we not have a website? Why do we not have a database of all this content so that that's what can be taught in the curriculums at film schools? When I was at film school, all I could learn about and be taught about was Tarantino and, you know, all these guys that, you know, like, you know, Clint Eastwood, because, you know, I studied directing and all of that. And I was just like, that's really great. But where are the people that I want to see today? You know what I mean? Where's why don't you teach me about Patu? Like, I want to see Patu's work in my curriculum. You know what I mean? I think there's been a lot of waves and like the landscape is really changing. And I think we need to take ourselves more seriously as South Africans. And whenever there is an opportunity to use references, whenever there is an opportunity to, you know, to relate to work being done, let's look within ourselves and let's also look within the borders of our wonderful neighboring countries in this beautiful continent that we live in, you know, and be authentic and unapologetic about that.
There you go. There's a challenge to all the doers. Let's create that bank. Let's collaborate in terms of our own African authentic stories, because we are so rich, like you're saying, in terms of things unimaginable that we just haven't come to the surface in terms of our history and in terms of where we come from. So there is a lot that we can still unearth and uncover. And just as you're speaking, Flavia, you talked about television and film. And is there a difference in terms of writing characters for film and television? Can we unpack a little bit about that in terms of the approach? How do we approach it differently in terms of character development for characters for film or TV formats?
There's definitely a difference. And I think that's such a great question to ask, because as a writer, you also need to understand what platform you're writing for, right? There's linear, there's OTT, which is now the future, right? And then there's cinematic space, right? And those are different conventions, and the viewing patterns for the audiences are also different. They consume the content differently. So you need to be very cognizant of that as you write. When you write for linear, you need to be able to write a story that's compelling and that hooks your audience. The story needs to be able to hook your audience from the moment they tune on, because that person is sitting with a remote and they have, if they are on a sort of like a pay TV platform like DSTV, they have 300 other options they could be sitting on. So if you're not able to hook them within the first 5 minutes of your screenplay or your story or the narrative, be sure that they're going to do this. They're going to be hopping to something more exciting because they have all these exciting things that they can watch, right? But even over and above that, once you've been able to hook them, with a strong, powerful sort of like beginning, if the episode ends on a note whereby they don't feel like the story is actually beginning, be assured that you will not find them the next day, or be assured that you will not find them the next week or whenever the series will be playing. So maybe let's look at a format of a 13-part series. And I think what is really, really interesting about a 13-part series is you need to find something that is compelling for, an overarching sort of like dramatic question that you're going to answer throughout the 13 parts, right? But at the same time, you need to be able to ensure that there's appointment viewing. And how do you do that? By strong cliffhangers. I do find myself often fighting a lot with writers who want to leave everything to the end because it will be more exciting when they unpack then. But for me, I'm just like, well, unfortunately, the audiences that you might be having right now, or that you might have hooked with that strong first episode that you have, might not be able to sit long enough to wait until you start unpacking things and giving them twists and turns in episode 8, moving on to 13. So the trick for television writing, especially in a series, is you need to have strong cliffhangers, because if your cliffhanger, if your episode can end on a note that it makes the viewer feel like the story has just begun, they will not even think twice than to come back the next week and watch. And they will not even try watch your content on catch up and watch something else, because they also want to be part of the conversation on Twitter. They want to be part of the conversation on social media with everybody else who's watching and engage. And that's the art of television. And I think that's what excites me so much, is you are able to engage people who might think that they know the story, but every single day they come in for it. There's something different that comes from it, and they engage differently to it, which is very different from an OTT space such as Showmax or your Netflix or Amazon, or you can, mention quite a few, whereby the viewing pattern there is more to binge, right? Still very similar in the sense that your story has to be hooking, you have to have great cliffhangers, it needs to be compelling, you need to have great high stakes, and. However, you can, be a bit more lenient about how you end and how you, what you unpack when during the series progression, be it a mini series or a conventional 13-parter, 10-parter, however long it may be. Because you know that they are spoiled for choice, and you know that, perhaps someone might be able to binge on 4 to 5 episodes all at once and find whatever is interesting within that batch that they're watching, which is very different from a movie per se, right? Because the movie is something that someone watches once off, and the worst thing that could happen is for them to dip in and out, So now, but you also cannot be always on high tension, because there need to be moments of breathability. There needs to be moments of humor. There needs to be moments of escaping, and you need to like play around your different sort of like storylines in the movie, and just do a whole wave where you make them laugh, cry, get frustrated, and then eventually they can breathe where your resolution comes. But with that, I think the challenge would then come in with, how do you first of all hook them for a good, like 10 to 15 minutes, and then you settle the story again, you set up whatever it is that you've set up, and then later on you pay it off, right, and still engage them. So in all those 3 different platforms, you can see that it's different types of art forms. Yes, we are still writing. Yes, it's still story. Yes, we're still engaging with all the conventions we need to engage with. but there's a science behind it. And I think a lot of writers miss that. I find a lot of times with my team, when we read proposals, we get people saying this is, a telenovela, but it very much reads as a drama because of, the structure. Or someone might say this is a movie, and you'd be like, well, you're underplaying yourself because this is something that could be long running, And I think it goes back to Caroline's sentiment of do your research and understand what it is that you're writing for. You can't just, start writing without having an understanding of this is going to be a movie, and in a movie, this is what I need to make the audiences feel. These are the beats I need to hit. And so this is how I'm going to flesh it out versus this is going to be a movie for a Showmax, which is also very different from a movie for, a cinematic release, versus this is going to be a telenovela or a drama series that I'm writing. Yeah.
Fantastic. Fascinating. We're going to unpack a little bit more about audience just now, but I want to find out from you ladies what you're binge watching. What are you finding enthralling and hooking at the moment? What are you watching in your own homes?
Robin,
you want to expose yourself to Indian matchmaking?
So I'm busy watching on Netflix. So I have Netflix. So I'm the binger. I'm busy watching a brilliant series, and it really speaks so much about female representation. It's called Black Earth Rising. It's Michaela Cole. It's a political drama based partly in the UK and partly in Rwanda. So basically it revolves around Rwanda genocide. And it's so good. It's exquisite. I highly recommend it.
All right. Flavia? We've lost Flavia for a second there.
Sorry about it.
Yes.
My battery's dying. I wish you had not
asked me. Girl.
No, well, I am too busy to be watching stuff, Sarah. But what I'm currently watching is I watch a lot of our local stuff, solely because it's part of my job to see that we don't repeat beats and we don't repeat storylines on our platforms. So I do watch a lot of our long runnings. I am obsessed with The River. I love The River so much. I watch The Queen. I do watch Isibaya, and obviously I watch Gomorrah for work purposes. I am absolutely loving Housekeepers as well, and I'm not being biased because I'm working on it. But I am such a local junkie. You don't understand. I love local so much. But in terms of international stuff that have really, really gripped me, I think the one series that have really, to mention three, one I really, really fell in love with, what's it called again? Man, I forgot the name, but I'm also quite obsessed with Money Heist. I think the sort of like, it's so authentic, it's so nuanced to that market. They're not trying to be anything else but themselves. They're not trying to cater for anyone else but their market. And therein lies the secret, because the rest of the world fell in love with it because it was different, it was authentic, and it stayed true to who they were. Yeah. And I wish that, a lot of our creatives can also have that sort of mentality that my primary objective is local. And if I can tell the story the best way, in a way that people locally can resonate to it, perhaps it can have some international appeal, but it shouldn't be the other way around. You know what I mean? Which I think we're finding that a lot with writers and creatives right now is, I'm going to create an international piece. This is for an international market, but it's very much based in South Africa, and you're very much, borrowing from South African sort of like nuances and cultural relevances, but you're creating it for this international market. And that's why a lot of things fall flat and fall through.
This is the mark.
This is the mark. And I absolutely fell in love with Money Heist for the same reason. Narcos as well. I'm obsessed with how authentic those two pieces are and how they've gotten this amazing global traction in that sense as well. Yeah.
Great. Caroline?
Yes, I do have to say that between reading scripts and treatments, I am obligated to watch what I write. So I do have to watch The River and Gomorrah, and I have to read Legacy. So it's hard in between to really immerse myself in, a lot of content, but I did enjoy watching Blood and Water. I ensure that I watch anything that is local on Netflix. I've made that pact with myself. So
we've got 2 questions here, and they're quite interrelated. So the one is from Amp Media, who says, I'm a young woman who's decided to shoot my own parenting series because it feels as though waiting for funding or opportunities was taking too long. Do you have any advice on where I can take it? And a similar question from L Easy says, so let's say I have written a script and I want to sell it. How do I go about doing it? So these 2 have obviously.
Is it just me who's been stuck, guys? Is it
Oh, okay.
Sarah's
I
side?
think we've lost Sarah. Oh, okay. I thought it was me.
I also thought it was me. All right. Well,
I think whilst we wait for her to join, shall we unpack the questions? The 2 questions.
Absolutely. I mean, Flavia, I think you're the best person to take this one. Lead us, please.
So the first question is, I believe she has, what was the first question again?
It was about, I've shot my own series while I wait because I just felt like, I couldn't find places. Where can I take it?
Yeah. No,
so this is something that's complete.
Yes, so it's something that's complete, and I think it's really great, and I love the whole notion of not having to wait for someone to give you funding before you can, work on your craft, because the more you do, the better, right? I do know that, as Mzansi Magic, we do license quite a few movies. We actually do, and I would urge a lot of filmmakers to definitely look into our licensing deals. So that means you've already shot something, and then we just license it for a period and pay you sort of like a lump sum for that. But the challenge with that comes in with, because we are sitting on a pay TV platform and there's a certain standard that we need to adhere to because these are paying customers, the quality needs to be good. So I think what I would caution against, or perhaps advise filmmakers, is to really, really get to know what their broadcast standards are, whether it's from Mzansi Magic and SABC and ETV, wherever you're taking your product to. And before you make anything, just ensure that you align with the technical specs. And when you do go to post it, that also aligns with the delivery specs, because the worst thing you could do is spend all this money and equipment and have all this cast and crew shoot something that's not broadcastable, because the story might necessarily be good, but for technical reasons you can't play it on air. So I think it's very, very good to sort of get to know that and understand that first before you make your own stuff. And once you get that, definitely do go for it. In terms of writing a full script, there is a lot of avenues in which you can get development funding. So I would again caution against writing full scripts and developing something fully and then looking for money, because perhaps whoever you are going to take it to, they might want to, change the story a bit or align it with their platform. And that means that you would have to redo the work again. There's a lot of development funding that comes from the likes of the Gauteng Film Commission, the very same organization that's hosting us today. There's development funding from various film commissions, KZN Film Commission, Eastern Cape. There's funding coming from the NFBF for development, DTI. There's really try Google. I think also a lot of people don't Google and they don't do their own research. So Google and search, where can you find development funding? And what that helps you with is it presents you with an opportunity to have a bit of money whilst you develop, but you can also be able to hire a good story editor or a script editor who can then help finesse your story for you accordingly. Especially if you're emerging, write the story you want to write, but get someone really experienced to, read and proofread and help you with structure, story, character design, so that you have something that's fully fledged that you can maybe sell on markets where you go to sort of film markets, film festivals, and you are looking for people who can perhaps give you production or distribution partnerships in that regard. In terms of broadcasting, we don't take full scripts because we develop together. It's a collective effort. So again, with that, the best way would to create your concept, submit your proposal. There's guidelines on the submission portal as to what it is that we look out for. It's very simple. It's just detail on, your series in a sense of an overarch, some character descriptions, and just a brief overview of perhaps episodic breakdowns, which is also not that detailed. And if we find potential in that, then we commission it, and the development then begins from, treatments to script, and then, the whole process then plays out as is. So, but having said that, I wouldn't want to discourage anyone from writing. I think, enhance it. Like, I mean, Caroline and Robin, you guys can chip in, but working on your craft and really growing and being really good at your craft means that you have to constantly do it and do it and do it and keep doing it the whole time. So it's good to write for yourself, but if you want to sort of like approach someone with that, don't overwrite, because they might have an influence or some sort of input that they would want to put on their story should they be interested.
Yeah, I agree, Flavia. Sorry, Caroline. Firstly, definitely heads up to the lady doing her parenting series. Absolutely. If you don't get the funding, just do it. I think also what a lot of people don't understand is that in this industry, you're playing the long game. Unless you are incredibly lucky, this is going to be a really slow process to go from where you are to where you want to be. And there's always room for growth. Even if you've been in the industry for 30 years, you still have a way to grow and develop and learn. So if you're struggling to get signed and get that job, keep doing what you're doing, keep writing. And in order for you to improve and learn if this is something worth your while, if it is really a talent and how you can improve, I would say build your own audience. Whether that audience is on YouTube and you can get a larger audience and gain their perspective and their feedback, or even if your audience is your family and your friends, to show them what you're doing, to let them read your scripts, to let them see the video that you shot, and to give you honest feedback in what works, what doesn't work, and why doesn't it work, so that along the way, while you're waiting to get in there, you are growing and you're learning and you're getting better.
Yeah, I agree with those advices, and I think that it's worthwhile, because I too was once that person asking, how do I get my foot in the door? And one of the ways I can say, in all honesty, is that it's not glamorous. So you really have to think truly and deeply, do I want to do this? Because it takes work. Robin said you're going to need to really put in the work, and you might see the results much later. That being said, it doesn't mean, I'm not discouraging anyone, but it has to be something you truly love, because what it took for me was to ask to sit in writing rooms that I was not getting paid to sit in. And that doesn't mean I had to work for free, because that's another conversation that is quite difficult, and it can be contentious. But it was about, am I willing to put in the free time that I have, or the little time that I have, to sit in for hours in a writing room and just learn from the people that are doing well in this industry, the likes of, the Fergusons, the Chatter Pictures that have obviously found a way to really break through the clutter in this industry. So that's one way. It's that sometimes we write, but we don't really know what it takes. And we keep thinking that, are we just not getting it? But it's about being able to expose yourself to understand the mechanics of it. And writing really is a skill that you have to hone in on, And that's one way. It's approach production houses and ask if you can sit in their writing rooms, so that you know how to write. Because sometimes the reason it's so hard to sell is that it isn't what is required. So that's one way. And Flavia mentioned festivals. I think, again, there are film festivals. There aren't really series festivals. So again, you have to know what is required. I can write a short film. I'll get funding for it. The NVF is the National Video and Film Foundation will sponsor something of that nature. And there's so many festivals in the world. There's so many locally. And that's where you get to really create a network for yourself. A lot of jobs that I started within were just from networks that I made at film festivals, where I said, I'm really interested in starting to write. And I would like to know, and there are producers who say, I have an idea, I just need a writer to bring this idea to life. And I only discovered that once I had gotten into the industry, once through networks such as Swift, where you sit and you're in a group with people that are doing the work, and you have access, because that's another thing that we and historically I found was the difficult thing. It was having access. Who do I know? Who can I approach? Who would be willing to read my script and give me honest feedback if they are not themselves writers or script editors, And so find that network. And yes, don't stop creating, but just have an intention of, I'm going to create this film and send it to this film festival and get feedback and get, buyers, distributors in the same space and hear what they think. So that's definitely one of the few ways that I could say to approach it.
I think also, I love what you're saying, Caroline, and I fully agree. And for me, when I was done with varsity and I had done my honors, I had studied writing for 4 years, right? Both in television and in film. But I knew that there wasn't enough for me to just, go knock at Clive Morris or, Red Pepper. It was Quizzical, it was Curious Picture at the day. It was right next door to After. I knew I couldn't you just go knock and say, listen, I'm a writer, please can I get some writing work? The type of knocking I would do is, I am a film student, or I just, recently just finished film school. Please can I come make coffee on set so I can get experience, which I understand is not a luxury that everybody has. It was also not a luxury for me because, my parents had spent so much money in film school, and how Black parents are, they now needed to see where this money is going, where's the job type of thing, and I guess what also, for me, I was just like, I need to grow, and I need to work on my craft. And I stumbled across this really amazing writing course at NFEF. It's called the Sadiba Spark program. And that's where we met, Caroline, actually, many years ago. My gosh. And, Caroline was there for script writing. I was there for script editing because I wanted to do something different. And just how much I was able to learn about writing in that 5 months was beyond and more than what I had learned acquiring my degree in writing and my honors, just in 5 months, because it was practical, it was collaborative, it was the best of the best sort of mentors in the country. And then straight after that, as if that was not enough, I signed up for Talents Durban, the Berlinale Talents program. Sarah, congratulations, by the way, which you're a part of as well. And that also just opened my eyes in terms of how to approach writing. And the reason why I'm saying all of this is, as an upcoming writer who hasn't necessarily penetrated the industry, the best way to do it is to keep learning. As you continue writing, there's so many programs out there, brilliant programs that are free of charge and that have the best mentors in place to help you hone this craft. And I think sometimes we are always in a hurry to penetrate and to, assume certain roles without having to learn enough, And I think you can do these programs and still be a practitioner. You can still have a job and still do this. Even in fact, as much as I work in broadcasting, there's a program I've just joined that I'm going to start in the next week. So I think definitely look at industry initiatives, industry programs, writing programs, sign up for them and just work on your craft. And in doing that, you also network, you get to meet people, and you don't know where the conversation could lead because you don't know who those people are, where they work, what opportunities they might present to you as well. So definitely look at, signing up for a couple of writing programs.
Fantastic. So there is power in networks, and there's power in spreading your wings in terms of the people you meet and the kind of festivals you go to. And I know that there's lots of online things and environment we're working with because of COVID-19. Encounters Film Festivals opening up. They have free workshops where you can go online, pitch, and share your ideas with people who are in the industry already. The Durban Film Mart is coming up, as well as the Durban International Film Festival. So just look out for those online in terms of, are there unsolicited, unlisted opportunities you could take advantage of? Are there people who are looking for the sort of content that you're offering as well? So those are always other avenues. And of course, just write to somebody, reach out to somebody on social media. It could lead to real opportunities opening up. I'm having some technical difficulties with this data, but I hope it's stable now. Thanks so much for your patience. I see that people were also struggling to connect on the comments. Just to run it off in terms of audiences, I know that we have, as Flavia did speak in detail just about the different types of platforms that do exist at the moment, but is there any more in terms of knowing and writing for your audience as a script writer?
Yes, definitely. As a writer, I think it's important to know who your market is. It's idealistic to write for a rainbow nation, but finding ourselves in 2020, we are still not quite there, realistically, and it's unfortunate. And yes, there are platforms whereby, we can try, put in some representation here and there, be more inclusive, and. However, the way our industry is broken down it's very fragmented, and there's a lot of segments, right? So you need to, first of all, know, who am I writing this for, right? Am I writing this for a Black mass market? Am I writing this for a Black premium market? Am I writing this for a colored Afrikaans market? Or am I writing this for a white Afrikaans market? Am I writing this for an English white market? Or am I writing this piece for an English Indian or an English colored market? See, once you are able to understand what it is that you're writing for, then you can then detail your nuance, your plot, your story, your creation, your story sort of like progression according to that, right? Not only just in our platforms at Mnet, but SABC, you have SABC1, SABC2, SABC3, you have ETV, you have BET, you have your Mnet conventional sort of like, the anchor channel for Mnet, you have your KykNet and Key. Those are two different markets, but it's the same brand. You have your Mzansi Magic, your One Magic, two different sort of channel, two different markets, but the same sort of like channel umbrella. And you have your Showmax, which is also very different from what we have on linear. Then you have your Netflixes, and even in Netflix, Seriously Single is created for a specific market, which might not necessarily be for everybody who's on Netflix in South Africa today. So I think the first thing you need to understand is I'm writing for a specific market. One of the things we find a lot as broadcasters is when we do read proposals, we find ourselves saying, oh my gosh, this is such a brilliant, brilliant story, but it's just not for us because we are Black mass. And similarly, perhaps someone at Mnet 101 will be like, this is such a stunning story, but we're going to pass it on to KykNet because it's just not for us. I'm assuming with SABC, speaking from a place of not, having worked there, but those are the dynamics as well, because when you look at the channels and how they're broken down and the type of content they put out, it's very clear that there's a specific market they are catering for. I know writers don't want to hear this, but unfortunately, that's the reality of our country currently, and that's the way in which audiences consume content. So the first thing I would like to urge writers is to know the market, and you can't do a one size fits all. Is that the saying?
Yeah.
You can't do a one size fit all because that just it doesn't work, because also where do you put it? And wherever it is that you're going to put it, you're going to upset that specific market, right? I think the platforms that are more lenient in that regard would be like, for instance, your Mnets. I think Legacy is definitely going to be able to, break some of the barriers just by purely looking at the promo. Caroline didn't tell me anything, I promise. But solely being my observations coming from having looked at the promo, having looked at how inclusive it is. There's a great juxtaposition between a Black family and a white family, and also I think a first generation colored family. I stand to be corrected in that. And that's a beautiful production because you get to see that they are able to go into different races and different dynamics and hopefully unpack the interpersonal relationships in that, right? But that's also a minority of the content we have on air right now. So if you want to be commissioned by a broadcaster, you need to know which market you're targeting. Similarly, if you want to create a cinematic piece, a movie, a feature film, or whatever the case may be, you need to know what market you are catering for. You cannot go and create a happiness is a 4-letter word and expect that whoever's from Ventersdorp is going to go watch it, and you're just going to be like, the market is South African, because there is no such thing. It was very much for the Black premium market, just as I'm trying to think of an Afrikaans title.
Seriously,
pardon? Did someone say something?
No. I think you're something for a Black premium market. I can't think of one for Afrikaans. Maybe Black
Bakhat, yes. When you make a Bakhat, for instance, beautiful film that was highly commercial, made a lot of money, but 98% of that audiences that went to go watch were white Afrikaans, and perhaps 2% were colored Afrikaans. You know what I mean? But they were they were unapologetic, and they knew which market they were targeting, and that's why it was so successful. But you will then find that, we don't have a lot of English-speaking cinematic pieces that go out locally. And that's perhaps because our English market is more sort of interested, and they're more drawn into international content. And they might not be necessarily interested in paying, how much is a movie ticket right now? 90 rands? Movies are so expensive, but they might not be interested in paying 90 rands and an additional 80 rands for popcorn and drinks for an English-speaking feature film if they could be catching Spider-Man, which has a higher production value, for the same amount. You know what I mean? It's painful to hear, but it's actually our reality. And I think we need to have these conversations, and as writers, we need to get out of our bubbles and understand that this is what we're dealing with, and we need to write for a specific market. And we need to also transform the industry as writers and as creators. So we can't say, because these are realities, like Robin had said, this is what we need to stick to, right? But at the same time, we need to make money. So for me, I would then say baby steps. You then look at an OTT space, like a Showmax or a Netflix that we currently have in the country. And they are more lenient in terms of having market-specific content. And that's why you will have a fully fleshed Black film, fully fleshed in English, and that's fine, And that's why you will have an inclusive film sitting on the platform, and it represents everyone, and that's fine. So I think when you do want to do something that's a bit more inclusive, and you do want to target this rainbow nation, you can then look at an OTT space to make that type of content. Or additionally, alternatively, you could, like Robin had said, create your own content and put it into your own platforms. You never know who might find traction, who might be interested in licensing it, who might be interested in developing it. It's just like how Issa Rae got, Orchid Black Girl, and how now it's led to, Insecure. And Insecure is the most brilliant. Oh my gosh, I should have actually mentioned that Insecure is my most favorite series I've ever watched, and I'm obsessed, So, but the thing is, she didn't wait for anyone to fund her, and she didn't wait for anyone to sort of like give her opportunity. She kept on writing, and she kept on creating, and it got and landed into the right sort of hands. So I guess what I'm saying is, the first thing to know is to know your market and write for a specific market. and write for a specific platform. I'm echoing just what I had said previously. And then secondly, it's also important to stick to genre conventions. You can't go around making your own conventions as a writer and be all experimental and then expect a broadcaster or a funding organization to just jump on it. You can definitely do that for your own passion project, but if you are looking into engaging an audience, you need to stick to conventions. I love referring to Robert McKee a lot because I think he's the father of story, and he has a very, very simple way of breaking down really complex writing sort of dynamics. And part of what he says is that writing is not about rules, but it's about principles, and once you understand that, is I don't have to do everything according to the rules, but if I apply certain principles, they are most likely to work, right? And so that's the thing about genre conventions, is you have to know, if I'm going to write for a Black mass market, the convention predominantly there is melodrama. Why? Because Black people are just melodramatic. It's in their nature. We are very sort of like colorful, loud, expressive sort of like a nation and a demographic, race, if you may. And so with that, you can't go write something that doesn't necessarily link to that sort of like melodramatic convention for a Black mass market. And similarly for other markets as well. We do find a lot of writers who write out of context and who don't stick to conventions. I'm not sure if it's maybe a way of trying to be different or whatever the case may be. But then everything just falls apart because you're just like, well, that's not believable, Well, this is definitely not a romantic comedy because initially you set it up as a boy meets girl, boy loses girl, but then at some point it's boy meets girl, boy kills girl, boy goes and kills everybody else, boy does whatever, and you still want to say that's a romantic comedy. That's not the genre convention, So stick to conventions, because if you stick to conventions, you can color in within, those conventions. And like I said, it's not rules, it's principles that you need to apply. And I think also just understanding an audience is to create universal stories. Yes, be specific about the social resonance and the realism and just culturally whoever it is that you are making the story for. But in that, let there be universal stories so that everybody can take away from it. You know what I mean? Again, Money Heist is about a heist, but it's emotionally compelling. There's a lot of interpersonal sort of like dynamics in that. And there's all of these things that go in that people who are not necessarily criminals find themselves watching because it's emotionally engaging, because they were able to look into themes of love, betrayal, loyalty, those universal themes that go a long way. So I do find that writers a lot, especially for linear, they will have very niche sort of like themes that they play around, and they want to sit on a big platform such as a television platform where you engaging with millions of viewers, and they just want to tell a story about a Flavia who lives wherever Flavia lives, and she talks this way, and this is her lived experience. Totally excluding Flavia's mom, who might be sharing the TV screen with her and watching the program with her. Totally excluding Flavia's uncle, who might be sitting in Zerist and watching the very same program and having to have an entry for that story. To Flavia's daughter, if Flavia has a child. And so I think you need to also be able to be universal around your themes so that people can have an entry despite of, their age and the different generations that they come from. The more, specific you are, also allows you to be universal about your story in that sense. And then finally, do your research. I loved what Caroline said in the beginning. You cannot come and knock at a broadcaster's door and want to be commissioned if first you don't know what kind of stuff they commission, right? Secondly, you don't know what's sitting on the platform and what people are watching on the platform and what kind of stuff is being put out. And thirdly, if you don't know the specific sort of like character design of the world that you've created is, right? Again, Robert McKee says that you need to be the god of your world, your story world. So you need to know your story world inside out, and you need to understand every single dynamic that happens there. So you cannot go and tell a story about a world that you don't know about, or repeat a story and sell it to a broadcaster and sell something that's probably already on air or has already been played. So you cannot say, I want to be commissioned, but I don't watch linear. You know what I mean? If you want to be commissioned for a linear space. Similarly, you can't say, I want Netflix to give me a commission or a development deal if you don't watch what's currently on Netflix and what they're putting out locally in South Africa and in Africa as well. So don't just write for yourself, understand your market and do your research. I think I've said a lot.
You've covered a lot of grounds and all relevant and all things I think that we all drew a lot from, just in terms of having universal themes and they're having things that speak to your audience and relatable and can be consumed by the audience. There's no use making a niche, very small film where it's not going to touch a big audience unless you're an established person and you have the luxury of the time to do that kind of passion project. We've got a question from Usmangele who says, what book do you recommend that speaks about screenwriting and also includes understanding the business side of being a screenwriter? I know you've referred to Robert McKee quite a bit. Are there other books by other authors or other sort of publications that you think have gems and have things that people can concretely come out of their understanding more about screenwriting?
So I am through and through a McKee fan. I think that's like a story Bible for me. I feel like as a writer, you need to engross yourself in that. I love Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. I think that's also very powerful, sort of like a powerful writing piece. In terms of understanding the biz of film, I'm not quite sure what kind of books I can recommend. Maybe my wonderful sisters can recommend a few there, but I'd like to reiterate the whole notion of doing programs because they open up your eyes to a lot and you get to learn a lot from doing them. Yeah.
And we're fortunate in South Africa to have those programs so you can practically learn as well. Caroline, you wanted to say something?
No, I was going to definitely recommend, and then Save the Cat is a good one. I'm trying to remember the author, but if you just look up Save the Cat, it should come up. It's a good one that I used, especially when it comes to the business side of it, how to write proposals that are compelling and can be commissioned. So I think that's a one I would recommend, and it's an easy read. It's really not complicated.
And lots of websites and resources online as well. No Film School and a lot of such websites as well, where you can log on to get short videos from people who are actually practicing, just giving you day-to-day running of being in a story room or being a filmmaker. So lots of resources online as well.
But I mean, to that, I think I was going to just talk about the books. I'm saying that what Flavia said is so important about learning the principles, because then you know what you can kind of how to break the rules. You first have to learn them. And a lot of, I know our new film school students or graduates were so quick to want to experiment, but you have to grasp the principles before you can break the rules, and you have to earn it as well. I think that broadcasters are open-minded, so if they've seen a production house doing consistently well, they're able to give them more freedom. But you, as somebody who hasn't produced, hasn't been commissioned, coming up with something that is just too experimental and too niche, it's harder to trust that you can do it because you haven't proven that I can play by the book and I know the principles and this is how I can do it differently. I think we're all open to innovation, but it has to be, earned, I think. So, learn the principles in order to understand how to break them, the rules.
That's spot on, Caroline. Yeah.
Can you guys believe that we filled up 2 hours? We're so worried we might not reach that. And with still so much to say. Just in closing,
so much.
in terms of closing, just some final parting words and closing remarks out to everyone who's listening and wants to break into the industry as a script writer or as a content maker. Robin.
Well, I'd say, especially as a screenwriter, we're always told to write what you know, and we've spoken about that a lot. And yes, absolutely do your research and everything. But I'd say the key element to what you need to know to be a screenwriter is knowing human behavior. If you know human behavior, you can write characters that are relatable and not forgettable. You know, if the audience can relate to your character, it means that they are rooting for them, that they are horrified when something bad happens to them. And that is really attained by studying and understanding authentic human behavior and how people really interact and how they really react. And yeah, I'd say that's my last parting thought.
Thanks, Robin. Caroline?
You know, just to add on, and I really love the advice that Robin gave. I think that a lot of the time we get so caught up in, I want to write a story that's going to change people's lives and that's going to educate and that's going to be revolutionary. But truly for me, as somebody who writes in fiction, I just want to write something that is entertaining and that I believe will be enjoyable. And part of what Flavia said earlier is about, don't write for everyone. You can't write for the world. So really be intentional in saying, not everyone is going to love this. And I can entertain them and I can make people feel. And that for me is where I come from whenever I write. I am not trying to be a savior. I don't think I'm going to save humanity. But if I can make people feel, if I can just offer something when they're watching those 22 minutes that I write for every script, if I can just make people feel and say, that actually made me feel something. And when I get that feedback, it's enough. So, you know, that's what I think. We put so much pressure on ourselves to change the world and save the world. And that is a great thing. But I think, you know, that's what organizations can do. And if you want to create content that will be memorable, that will be entertaining, and that you yourself will enjoy watching, you know.
Yeah, I agree, Caroline. I think, well, just for me personally, I really learned a lot from what Flavia had to say about audience, because what I do, and I think as a starting point, it's a great start, is writing for yourself, writing content that you want to see and that moves you, because you're not an island. If you want to see it, chances are that there are people out there who want to see it too.
Yes, Flavia.
Sure. I mean, it's powerful. I mean, I don't even think I have to add on, because what Caroline and Robin have said is just so beautiful and it's powerful. And so powerful, you know. I love that, Robin. If it resonates with me and if I want to see it, surely there should be someone out there who wants to. And again, with what Caroline is saying, writing to make people feel, I think the word is resonance. If you are able to have content that resonates, absolutely, you know, that's the trick. And I find a lot of stories fall flat because people don't have stakes, or their stakes are always sort of like linked to material things or very surface things. But if your stakes are linked to emotions, which goes back to the universal themes, and your stakes are linked to emotions, everybody would be able to resonate, because it's either they sympathize or they empathize with you because there's emotions linked to it. And I guess one statement I just want to put out there is, when writing, especially if you are looking to write to get commissioned or to get some sort of funding, don't reinvent the wheel too much, you know. Don't reinvent the wheel too much. We have beautiful plot points from fairy tales and folklore and those type of sort of like very ancient sort of like means and ways, devices of telling stories. And those plots work till today. all you need to do is color them in and nuance them with whatever it is that you want to nuance them with. But if you can stick to those type of principles, you'll be able to come up with a good story.
Thank you so much. And I think I'll just echo all your sentiments about being authentic, that because that's the only way that you can come across and your own lived experience and reflecting that to the world. So thank you so much to everyone who's been watching. Thank you for your comments. We hope you got a lot out of this. The video will be available on Gauteng Film Commission Facebook page, as well as the Swift Facebook page. So please do log in there and watch, and do send us more comments. You can carry on having the conversation online, and we can chime in and respond where we can. But thank you so much to each and every one of you. Caroline, Flavia, Robin, thanks for your time. Thank you for your knowledge. Thanks for sharing all the valuable things you know about being in the industry, and keep telling stories that are inspiring us to be more ourselves.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was awesome.
Sarah, you've been amazing. Thank you so much.
Guys, none of these are going to work. If this is going to be a hit, we need the right lead. So demeaning to pick a female lead this way. But people pay to see pretty people on screen. We need someone who's blatantly attractive, né? Someone like Drew Barrymore, but local, and much, much younger.
Okay.
Someone like Lebu.
Lebu?
Yep. What? She's pretty but ordinary looking.
No, boss, I don't think I'd be the right
Work
one
with
for
me
that.
here, work with me. We need someone with Lebu's eyes. The secret is in the eyes. Everything is plain, but the eyes say, come hither. If we can find a girl with Lebu's boobs, that will be fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I want. Minus the pregnant belly, of course.